Martin Compton, and I just want to share by way of my own introduction to the idea of freedom to learn a few quotes from people who focus on one aspect of learning that has a very real impact on a student's ability to be liberated, to be free, and to enjoy learning. There are many contextual factors, of course, that feed in to a student's experience of learning. Who their teachers are and their pedagogic approach, personalities, their own personalities, disciplinary specificity, whatever it is that they're studying, their own context, their backgrounds, their cultural experiences, their socio-economic experiences, personal values, so many things. But something that we do have actually perhaps more control, more agency over, both as students and members of academic staff, is the emphasis that we put on the products of their learning and the value and weight that we place on things like grades over perhaps and above, particularly in the minds of the students, because of the nature of the context and the circumstances that we operate in my case, in a UK higher education institution, and how much weight and value is put on the grades themselves over and above the stuff that they're learning and the stuff that they're producing as evidence of that learning. How can we, just in this one tiny domain, perhaps reinvigorate a freedom and a joy for learning by turning their focus and our own focus away from the grades, perhaps towards more the learning itself and the feedback, and perhaps challenge one of those things that we often hear people complain about in academia. Students don't read the feedback, they're only interested in the grades. How much are we party to that? How much are we reinforcing those behaviours? And how can we perhaps encourage students away from that? No answers in this video, but I will offer the lens of a few experts, more expert than me, that's for sure, in terms of why this might be a bigger problem than we may imagine, and why we should think about it and reflect on it more. So let's start over 100 years ago. This I really like because it really reinforces the idea that this isn't a new phenomenon. This is something that people have been aware of for a long time, and yet we persist with some of the problems that this represents. So Finkelstein, 1913, said, when we consider the practically universal use in all educational institutions of a system of marks, whether numbers or letters, to indicate scholastic attainment of the pupils or students in these institutions, and when we remember how very great stress is laid by teachers and pupils alike upon these marks as real measures or indicators of attainment, we can but be astonished at the blind faith that has been felt in the reliability of the marking systems. Problems with reliability, too much faith, too much stress, astonishment at why we're putting that faith in the reliability, and that universality of it as well. This is a mountain to climb if we're going to think about and address this. We need to interrogate why we are in this position. What are the positive reasons that we depend so heavily and put so much weight and store in grades, when some of the problems that are already being hinted at in this quotation become more prominent in our thinking? Let me take you to someone a little bit more recently. So Emeritus Professor Chris Rust, from Oxford Brookes, said, much current practice in the use of marks and the arrival at degree classification decisions is not only unfair, but is intellectually and morally indefensible and statistically invalid. I mean, as somebody who works in a university, which one of those am I going to deal with first? I may not buy in fully, I may buy in 100%, I may accept that this is a problem, but that we've got a system that is immutable and unchangeable. Whatever I think about this, this isn't somebody who is just expressing an opinion. This is somebody whose domain is education. This is somebody who has spent a lifetime researching in this area. And to say things like statistically invalid is a problem for someone, I think, who values the work that a university does. But even more so, intellectually indefensible, morally indefensible, unfair. We've got a problem here, not only with the weight that we put on grades, products, outputs of education, but also in terms of the impact that this is likely to have on people on the receiving end because of these issues around fairness and validity, morality, and intellectual defensibility. Okay, let's get a little bit more recent again. So this is from a literature review by Shinsuke Tana, and these are some of the problems. I think they sum it up very well here with what grades can do. So they say grades can dampen existing intrinsic motivation, enhance fear of failure, reduce interest, decrease enjoyment in classwork, increase anxiety, hamper performance on follow-up tasks, stimulate avoidance of challenging, and heighten competitiveness. Okay. These are the opposite of all the things that I want my students to experience in my classes. If there is evidence to suggest that the way in which I operationalize grades is having this effect on some or all of my students, I really should be thinking about ways that I can do things differently, perhaps. And then just to finish off, again, more recently, Jesse Stommel has been very vocal, strong advocate, particularly in the United States, for decentering the emphasis on grades, using the term ungrading, actually. But I thought it was very interesting to see what he says here about how it's made very difficult for teachers to challenge the status quo. He says, without much critical examination, teachers accept they have to grade. Students accept they have to be graded. Students are made to feel like they should care a great deal about grades, and teachers are told they shouldn't spend much time thinking about the why, when, and whether of grades. Obedience to a system of crude ranking is crafted to feel altruistic because it's supposedly fair, saves time, and helps students prepare for the horrors of the real world. Conscientious objection is made to seem impossible. This is very interesting because what it's suggesting here is that the rigor of academic debate, of challenge, of confronting an issue that is apparent to a lot of people is almost made to feel as though this isn't a valid thing to do, that we can't discuss this, that we need to push this to one side because the system is what we have, and challenging it is pointless and impossible, and objecting is something that we shouldn't be doing. Actually, I agree with what is implied here, that we can challenge the status quo, that we can worry and reflect on and discuss some of the consequences of grading, and if ultimately we think, no, this is the thing that we want and we need, and we rationalize it and we have a pedagogic baseline and a good, clear sense of the implications and impacts, fine. But have we thought through these things enough? Thank you.